everybody. Oh, this is so exciting. Gonna try and get everyone's attention here. Hi, everyone. So sorry. Hi. Hi, all. Oh, my colleagues in the back, can we get that music cut out? Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone, again. Thank you all for coming out here. My name is Erica. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the events associate here at Bookstore Magic. Before we get started, I did want to go over some housekeeping points for tonight. First off, we do kindly ask that you keep your mask on at all times during this event. Towards the end of the event, we will be doing an audience hand-raised Q&A, so please start thinking of some questions to ask now and raise your hand when the time comes. After the talk tonight, Tomi will be signing and personalizing books at the desk near the side door where you will be able to exit later tonight. We also have additional books available to purchase from my colleagues Anna and JG at the front. If you are joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we encourage you to buy a copy of Dele, Weds, Destiny online using the link in the live stream description. Alright, so tonight it is my privilege to introduce Tomi Obaro and Alex Jung, who are here to discuss Tomi's new book, Dele, Weds, Destiny. Seeing Tomi's book on our events lineup had me absolutely jumping for joy, and reading the lives of Fumi, Enitan, and Zainab and how their histories and heartaches intertwined only managed to affirm my joy. Obaro weaves and bobs between the three characters and their families with a stealth like no other, keeping you on your toes as the days leading up to Destiny and Dele's wedding day reveals secrets that only a tight-knit friendship could bear. Living in this world was like a breath of fresh air, and I am very excited for all of you here to feel the same way getting into it. Tomi Obaro is a senior culture editor at BuzzFeed News, whose cultural criticism and essays have been published in BuzzFeed News, The Morning News, and The Toast. Dele, Weds, Destiny is her first novel. And as I mentioned earlier, Tomi is in conversation tonight with Alex Jung, who is a features writer at New York Magazine and senior writer at Vulture. Without any further delay, everyone please give a very warm welcome to Tomi Obaro and Alex Jung.
Thank you all so much for coming. This is funny emotional. It's really lovely to see so many nice faces, even though they're covered in masks. Okay, so I'm going to read a bit from the prologue. In the photo, they're eating something out of frame. Pounded yam, perhaps, or maybe eba. They hadn't bothered to take off their graduation robes. They were ravenous, tired from the heat. Their bottoms sore from the plastic chairs they had sat in for hours. Their feet swollen from the high-heeled shoes they had worn for the ceremony. Fumi sits on the left. She had pinned a yellow flower to her graduation cap, so her loose, bouncy curls, courtesy of Mama Fatima's hair rollers, and not, as many people seem to think, a biological gift from her late Lebanese mother, frame her face just so. Enitan sits in the middle, her hand hiding her laugh. She had gotten her hair relaxed as well, but the results were not as striking. She was glad that her graduation cap added volume to what was now chin-length, lackluster hair. She had worn powder to mute the impact of her shiny forehead and to cover the smattering of acne that dotted her cheeks. Zainab sits on Enitan's right-hand side. She wears a tight black scarf that pulls the hair around her face, and she has twisted the ends of the scarf into a low knot at the nape of her neck so it looks like a sophisticated chignon. Zainab and Fumi were the striking beauties of the trio. Coke and Fanta, people would joke when they would see the three of them walking together on campus. That Enitan never got a nickname was a slight she was used to. You attract beauty, a boy had told her once, but he had meant this quite literally. She attracted beauty only in the sense that she herself was not beautiful, but her two best friends were. Enitan had wanted to mark their graduation with some sort of pageantry. She was the unabashed sentimentalist of the group, prone to easy tears. She procured a candle used when there was no light and had stuck it in the swallow since they had no cake. Fumi had rolled her eyes at first, saying it was childish, but then Zainab lit the candle and they all erupted into peals of laughter, their shoulders juddering, their stomachs aching from the strain of giggling so hard. The photo hadn't captured that moment, though. Only the aftermath, when Zainab had taken the candle out and they were all eating greedily with their hands, slurping Obaro soup off their fingers. Though well acquainted with unexpected sorrow, they were still so excitable that day, drunk with the potential they believe they have. At 19, 21, and 22, their lives stretch out before them, vast and expansive. They feel fortunate. They are fortunate. One of them marries a good man and has 4 sons, 4 tall, dark sons with cheekbones sharp as cutlasses and milk-white teeth. She will be surrounded by so much steady and abiding affection, so unlike the love she coveted from the romance novels she read voraciously in school, with their dramatic declarations and epic back and forth. But then there's tragedy, the usual, ordinary, ruthlessly unromantic kind. 3 strokes, and just like that, she has an incapacitated husband and the looming imminent prospect of life without him. It is so hard to think of what she will be when he leaves her. She has been wife, then mother for so long. Meanwhile, the one who brought the 3 of them together suddenly leaves the country less than a year after this photo is taken, opting to marry the first man who ever really looks at her. She had never known what it felt like to be gazed upon with rapt admiration, to say something and know she will be listened to. It's an intoxicating feeling, this attention. For a long time, she will think it isn't enough to sustain her. She is wrong. And one of them will become quite rich, as in she has an apartment in London, shops at Harrods rich, as in she has a house in Lekki and a sprawling compound in her husband's village rich, as in tinted black SUV windows rich and walk-in closet full of brand name shoes she seldom wears rich, as in drivers and servants and what her husband does is ill-defined and definitely involves bribery, but she prefers not to think about it rich. These 3 women are essentially sisters, though Fumi would chafe at the sickly sweetness of such a term. Their love has the makings of an ancient habit. It is automatic and unyielding. And though the unexpected separation so shortly after graduation tests their friendship, they remain steadfastly in each other's lives. And now they are going to be reunited for the first time since this photo was printed and handed out to each of them a few days after their college graduation ceremony in Zaria, Kaduna.
Hi everyone. Hi Tomi.
Hello.
It feels very joyous to be able to celebrate a book about a wedding and friendship, especially while the world is falling apart. So I appreciate that we can have this little space right now to talk and celebrate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you doing this.
It is kind of like a wedding of sorts, you know. You're bringing people together and we're celebrating a creation of something.
That is true.
How are you feeling?
I feel like embarrassed that I cried a little bit before. Like I really wasn't expecting that, and it is very embarrassing. But other than that, I feel really grateful. It's really, really nice just to see a room of people, everyone who I'm pretty sure I know, which is just really lovely. So yeah, I'm just so grateful.
I was YouTubing Nigerian weddings.
As you should.
And so I was just curious to hear you talk a little bit about choosing the wedding as a moment to sort of bring characters together for the action to kind of coalesce around.
Yeah, I mean, I think I knew even before I knew like the basic plot line of this novel that I wanted to write something about Nigerian weddings. I think, as I'm sure a lot of the people in the audience know, my family is one where, first of all, just because I'm like the youngest on my dad's side, I've been to a number of weddings. And certainly the pressure as I was like in my like late 20s to be like, okay, like you're graduated, where's the man, where's the husband, where's the wedding? I was just interested in the idea of sort of framing a book around a wedding, but actually not having the main characters really have anything to do with the wedding, and to sort of like really explore friendship as opposed to romantic relationships. And I also just think that, you know, Nigerian weddings are like really beautiful, at least certainly aesthetically, like vibrant, joyous occasions. And I just thought it would be weirdly like, to me, like there isn't enough, or like I was always like, I'm gonna read a book about where like there's a wedding and like, you know, that's like somehow related to the plot. And so, yeah, that was sort of the catalyst for why I decided to write about it.
The word that really came to mind for me was opulence, you know.
Indeed. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends a lot on like how much money you actually make, and you know, it really varies the scale. But yeah, certainly, this wedding, I mean, I don't know that I've actually been to a wedding as lavish as the one described in the novel. Maybe, but yeah, I mean, I think that was part of it. It was just the fun of being like, and how ridiculous can we make it, or can I make it?
I was curious if there were particular wedding moments that you sort of remember that you drew from, that you went to.
Let's see. Well, I mean, the spring, there's this hilarious video, and I wish I could find it, of, so spraying, for those who don't know, it's this thing that happens, not even just Nigerian weddings now, but I feel like Nigerians were the ones who made it a thing, and now Africans are like following the trend, as often happens. But like you have your dollar bills, and you like throw them or like shuffle them onto the, it could be like the mother of the bride, the bride's family, the groom's family. It's like a whole thing. And there's, I just find like the opulence of it is really incredible. And like to see, like there'll be money changers at these weddings. Like, and so those moments of like the spraying and the money changers is something that I remembered quite vividly. And then towards the end of the book, it's a wedding, it's a traditional wedding, it's an engagement ceremony, and in Yoruba weddings, you have like 2 MCs, and they just say they make the most cringeworthy jokes, like the weirdest allusions. And I remember watching a video of one of the Alaga Jokos like singing Beyonce, like really randomly and really badly, and I was like, that's just so random. And so that was definitely a moment I'm like, I'm gonna put that in my novel. So, yeah.
One of the characters, Remy, who's the daughter of Anita, and she's American-born, is probably the most skeptical of the guests that we can tell. And I was just kind of curious about these having different characters have different reactions to what's happening in the proceedings, and what your own sort of feelings around, the experience are like.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways Remy is like some components of like my skepticism, or like the questions I would definitely have whenever I would go to Nigeria. And like I don't know, I have very tortured feelings about weddings, and like Nigerian weddings in particular, because part of me is like, I want that attention. I want to be the star. Like, I want to be the celebrity. But then part of me is also like, but also marriage is a scam. And like, especially for women, like the things that women are forced to do. And especially like the culture around like Nigerian marriages. Like basically the expectation is the man cheats and the woman sits at home and like twiddles her thumbs and like pumps out children. And so like, I don't know, like I feel like I thought that in some ways that like writing this book would like give me clarity. I'm like, I'm one way or the other, but I go back and forth. And I did go to a really fun wedding with some newlyweds in the crowd, and I was like, dang, I think this would be kind of fun. So I don't know, I go back and forth.
So no clarity.
No clarity whatsoever.
Got it. A good chunk of the book, with the 3 friends, takes place in the 80s. And I was just kind of curious about what your own research process was like in terms of bringing that world to life.
So it was like, I think the number one thing that I knew I didn't want to do is too much research. I didn't want it to feel like I was writing an article. But I did read, there are a couple of books that I read that sort of gave me the lay of the land politically. And then there's like an event that happens in the book that's based on a real life event, basically like a skirmish between campus police and students. And that was something where I just read news reports about. I would ask my parents very cryptic questions about things they did in the 80s. But then I also just honestly kind of relied on my imagination, and was like, this is fiction. So I wanted it to be believable enough where like people weren't like, what is this? Especially for like Nigerians. But I also didn't want to feel like so bogged down by like trying to pay attention to details that would feel sort of like a term paper or me showing off like how much I read about, the Nigerian economy in 1984.
I would like to revisit the cryptic questions.
What would you like to know?
What were they?
I was like, what did you guys do at the dam? It was hard though because my parents are like very square. So a lot of this book was just sort of me to the extent. So I mean, the three women are very loosely like that structure is loosely based on the relationship that my mom has with her two best friends. But like again, because they're all very square, God-fearing women, I was just like, let me interject my own drama here. So I mean, some of it I was just like, let me. What if they smoked pot, which my parents have never done, but I was like, what if? And then it went from there.
What do they think about a book in which characters are very loosely based on them?
It's interesting. I think my mom, she's just flattered, but she also hasn't finished it, which, like, hopefully stays the case. Like, she started reading it, she visited in May, and she started reading it on the plane. It was like, oh, this is so, some of it hits close to home, but this is so good. I mean, she was an English major, so I think she has some sort of, like, understanding of the differences between fiction and nonfiction. I'm not sure if my dad has read it. I feel like it's fine if he doesn't, he can just support me from afar, So, but I think for the most part they have been, like, very supportive, which has been nice.
There's a sort of very beautifully rendered, or not beautifully, but heartbreakingly rendered abortion scene that happens in that section. And I was just also, like, I was interested in understanding what your own process was around writing that, how to approach that. What your mindset was.
So I mean that was sort of another process where I did a little bit of reading to sort of get a sense of like what kind of would vaguely happen. I think I knew that I wanted to. It is interesting. I have been thinking about that scene, a lot, obviously in light of the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and I think also just about like with these women, and then with a number of books that are sort of about Nigerian women. Like I read a lot of Buchi Emecheta when I was writing, and a lot of her books, they're just really bleak portrayals of motherhood. And what is sort of the key component is the lack of choice there. Like it really is just something like they don't even consider any other options. And so like the character of Fumi is just someone who I sort of knew, like, when she came to me that she would sort of set her own path, but also she would have certain fears. And, like, I think you see that in the way that she acts towards her daughter, Destiny. But, yeah, I mean, I think I was just sort of motivated. Also, I don't really outline, so I was just sort of like, oh, this is going this way. And then I kind of went with it. So, yeah.
So of the three characters, Anita, Funmi, and Zainab, did you have like a playlist for each, or like was there like a mood that you would sort of get into when you wrote about one character versus another?
I wouldn't say that I had playlists, but I mean I sort of knew, like with Funmi it was like, okay, confidence, brashness, a certain kind of sexual forwardness that I would go for. And Zainab is she's someone who writes, and so a lot of the books that she reads in the novels were books that I read as a child, and like her thoughts on like the great African men of literature were like my thoughts when I was like younger. So I think they would each sort of tap into different modes, and I think anytime her attitude, or just the way that she's received when she's in college is sort of like, the homeliest of the three, definitely reflected how I felt growing up. And some of those like tensions between being a foreigner, or like she's the character who moves to New York, lives in America. So sort of exploring those dimensions, and like having a daughter who doesn't look like her, who like pronounces her name in an American way. Those were all things I was sort of like refracting how, like how would I have felt in those situations. So it wasn't so much that like, I guess there were different modes of myself or thoughts that I had in various ways in each of the three.
So as Erica mentioned, you have a day job.
I do. What a time.
Which, congrats on having a day job. But how does one also write a novel while having a full-time job? I'm sort of just, for personal reasons, and I'm sure other people are interested too, how you do that.
I mean, to be honest, I think that the issue here is that you write as your day job, and I don't really. So I edit, and I honestly think that that's the key. It still feels it's you're still sort of using a creative muscle, but it's just really different. It feels like when I'm editing, I'm solving a puzzle, and when I'm writing, especially fiction, it's exploratory. And I was also just very fortunate to have good work-life balance. I mean, I think that's honestly the reason why I've stayed at my current job for so long. Was I was able to write in the evenings or write in the mornings. And my manager is somebody who's also written novels, so she was incredibly understanding. So yeah, I don't know. I really do think though that if my day job was to write, I don't think I would be able to also write again, in my leisure time.
So I should stop being a writer.
Maybe. I don't know, it's up to you though, but your profiles are so good, so don't stop.
Does, when you're sort of writing the novel, is it, are you able to shut off an editor brain at all, or does that sort of seep in at all where you're kind of editing as you're writing?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard. I think I'm somebody, and to be honest, one of the reasons, I'm somebody who would refine and refine and refine, and then I realized I'm never actually gonna keep writing. So I sort of had to work against that impulse. But I generally tend to be somebody who's keeps working at it until I feel this is satisfactory, which usually never comes because you're always if I could change this one thing. But I think for the most part, I mean, I guess, I was able to finish it. So I was able to shut off that part of my brain for long enough.
Were there parts of the book that kind of flowed easily for you?
Definitely. So the beginning, the prologue and then the first chapter, I sort of wrote very kind of seamlessly. Maybe the first maybe 20,000 words. I was just on a roll. I remember writing in my journal. I'm I'm really feeling this, and I would be I would just go home. My sister and I were living together at the time, and then she moved to Las Vegas and she left her desk. And before that, I had been writing a whole other novel, and I would go to the public library to write because I didn't have a desk in my apartment, which is so dumb. But then it's I got this desk, and suddenly I was oh my god, I can write anytime I want, and then it just became this very effortless thing. But then it definitely got harder. But yeah, definitely even before I sort of knew the major plot points, I always knew that I would wanted to start the novel in an airport. To me, that is such that's how I knew I was back in Nigeria. As soon as the plane landed and the men would jump out of their seats and the chaos of the airport, that just felt so sort of representative of all of my experiences traveling home. And so yeah, those first few chapters felt very natural.
And then did you ever hit a wall?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely.
And how do you sort of write through that or past that?
I think taking some time away helped. I also find that there's certain, and they're not even necessarily always novels that I liked, but reading there were certain kinds of fiction that I would read, and I don't really know how to even categorize them, but books that I would read that would suddenly make me want to go back and look at my own work. And so I definitely read a lot while I was writing, books that were kind of vaguely related to what I was writing, and then other things that weren't. But I also just think time away, I would go on walks, which I think was also helpful. But yeah, I don't know, I'm trying, the other weird thing about writing a book, honestly, is that it feels, I mean, and I say this as somebody who has never given birth, but I feel that sense of when people say you go through something that's difficult in certain ways, and then you forget all the difficulty, you're just oh, this is the thing. This is sort of what it in that sense, it feels okay, I did this thing and it was really hard, but now I'm okay, it's here, and it was great. But actually it was hard. And I will remember that at another point, just not today.
How did you sort of decide on the 3-act structure for the book?
I think actually this is where my editor, I think she's still here, Jordan, sitting in the back, was really helpful, because the original structure was much more ping-pongy, and then I also should shout out my friend Colin, who read some early drafts and like gave me that suggestion, and I ignored him, and then my editor said it, and I was like, oh, okay. But so yeah, she was helpful in terms of like, you know, like I think you should put all the, you know, all the contemporary stuff like towards the beginning and then the past and then go back. So that was really helpful. Before it was just sort of like all over the place.
Were there any sort of, I don't know, books or people that were lodestars for you that you sort of kept in mind as you were writing the book?
In terms of like inspirations or?
Yeah, it could be inspirations, or it could just be, I don't know, like a sense of purpose, I guess, that would sort of like, that connected the book to you in the world, if that makes sense.
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think I told a decent number of people that I was writing a novel. And I did that intentionally so that I would feel so much shame if nothing happened, that actually that was incredibly motivating. Because I'd be like, I told people I'm going to write a novel, so I'm going to, you know, write this. I have to do it, but otherwise I will die of shame. And then also I think my parents have just been very skeptical of any sort of career that isn't, you know, like medicine or law. And so they didn't really understand like why I went into journalism, and they're sort of like, it's a very volatile field, and I was like, I'm gonna write a book, and I'm gonna, you know, it'll be this tangible thing, and it will show them that I know what I'm doing. And so that was also motivating. So maybe I was just like motivated by like spite or like, I don't know. But were those the lodestars? I guess, I don't know.
Spite and a desk.
Indeed.
I think we should do some audience questions. If people... Yeah, don't be shy. People should take this opportunity to come sit very close to us. But also think of some, I don't know, some questions that might be on your mind. Yes?
Hi, I have a question. My question is actually sort of related to what Alex's question was, and this is something that I think a lot about, which is, when you were writing the book, who was the audience that you were thinking of? Because I often find, especially when people are writing stories that are set in a place that isn't the West, that like tendency to want to over-explain, and like, because you know, the idea that you're writing to like a white American audience, it can influence how you write. So did you think about that at all, and how did it affect your writing process?
I did think about it. I decided ultimately that I was writing for myself, and because I feel like I'm an odd, I mean, I guess since obviously that was my sister who asked the question.
A very good question.
It was a good question. I don't know, we're like in this weird, we straddled this weird world where like, we did technically emigrate to America, and we were born in England, but we visited Nigeria a lot, so I feel like I know more than like maybe the average Nigerian Americans, maybe a little bit about like what it's like to live in Nigeria, but like if I go to Lagos, people would be like, you're not from here, like, and so I was very, very aware of that tension, and I actually had I had two friends read it one of whom had just moved from Nigeria to America, and I was like, go through and tell me everything that seems fake. Check all the pidgin, like tell me like if the tonal marks for the Yoruba is wrong, like you be ruthless. And he was very good at being like, no, they wouldn't say that, they would do this. And like I still probably, honestly, like my biggest anxiety is how Nigerians in Nigeria would react. Because I feel like they're always like, people from the diaspora are always like messing up and like being annoying. But I was like, ultimately, it is for myself. And to the degree, you know, like there are things that I don't really explain, or like Yoruba terms that don't have, that aren't italicized. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess, I feel like that answer is kind of a cop-out, but it is true. Like, I did ultimately write. Like, I was my ideal reader.
Well, you know, to follow up also, like, do you feel like your own upbringing in different countries allows you a kind of more clarity around looking at something than maybe the people who are just in it are looking at it?
Maybe. I don't know, though. I feel like America is so powerful and so corrupting in that way that it's hard to, like, once you've lived here long enough, it's hard not to sort of take that American lens to things. So a lot of the writing, too, was just sort of, like, trying to claim this authority. Like, what would it be like for me to be like, okay, I'm a Nigerian woman in my 50s, and this is how I think about things, and this is how I think about politics, and this is sort of my approach. So, yeah, so I feel like that's how I'm answering all my questions with, yeah, but. Yes.
I'll and build off of that. But Tomi, congrats.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. I'm gonna ask a bit like a two-part question.
Okay.
I would be curious to hear your thoughts on the journey of being a writer. You know, and arriving to this book. What's a moment or experience that surprised you on the journey of like writing this book? It could be, and you can answer that however way you like. The second part of the question would be, or just more like a separate question, is what do you hope to have readers take away? You know, seeing that your book's out in the world.
So I'll answer the second question first. I just want people to enjoy it, to be honest. Like that, like I guess there are some things that are sort of serious in the novel, but for the most part I really enjoyed writing it, and like I don't think of it as like a particularly dark or heavy book. Like I think it is something that you could read like pretty quickly. And so I want people to sort of have this joyous feeling when they read it, and to like, you know, hopefully find the main characters interesting. And then as for what surprised me, I guess to be honest, there was a part of me that, I don't know, it's like the weird paradoxes of like, I guess being human or whatever, where like you can be like insanely arrogant and then also like very like self-effacing and deprecating. And so I think like when I reached, so my goal when I wrote the first draft was like to get to 70,000 words, because I googled like how many words is in a novel, and that's what came up. And so I was like, okay, that's my goal. Which, as for the few people here whose work I've edited, they know that I love to cut things. I'm always like, we don't need this, we don't need that. I love like making things like concise. And so writing that length felt so hard that like when I did it, I was like, damn, I did that. And it was genuinely surprising, because I really didn't think I was capable of writing that many words.
Do you have any, let me know if you can't hear me, do you have any advice for aspiring novelists in the audience? Or do you have anything you would say to your past self as you were starting this writing journey?
I would say even just like that word aspiring, I feel like get rid of it. I think for a while I thought like, especially because I didn't go to grad school for writing, I didn't get an MFA. I was like waiting for someone to give me permission to like, okay, now you can write fiction seriously. And then one of the most helpful pieces of advice was from my manager, and then from Jamie Attenberg, who blurbed the novel. She was just sort of like, you don't need, just write it. And so like this is, and I feel like this is almost like cliched advice, but it is really true. Like you just have to write it. You just have to write the thing. And like, even if it's, usually the first draft is pretty rough, you know, obviously. And like, there'll be things like, I wrote a whole other novel that will never see the light of day. And I remember being so mad when I realized that like, it wasn't gonna work. So I was like, I put in all that work, and I didn't want to be, and like, this is like another cliche where like, you know, the author who like finally breaks it big is like, and I worked on my draft for 10 years and 1 million publishers rejected me, and then they get all the glory. And I was like, that's not gonna be my story. And so the idea of like writing like 70,000 words of something that I sort of knew wasn't good was hard, but it also enabled me to realize that, okay, I can write at that length. And then when I started working on this draft and felt how much more seamlessly it felt, like that process, it was really clarifying. So I would say for anyone who wants to write, you just kind of have to do it. And then also to read, which people sometimes don't do, but you should absolutely be reading more than you write if you want to write seriously.
What was the other novel?
The funny thing is, the title is the same. But like literally everything else is different.
Is it about Dele and Destiny?
Well, the characters are different. Dele is a different person, Destiny is a different person, but they're still a marriage, and they're still getting married. Yeah, I don't know. It was just like, it just wasn't. It was me trying to do, it was me. I was trying. I was doing something. It just didn't work, but I tried.
But was doing that and that deciding that it was not working helpful in terms of?
It was ultimately, and there are certain things like. Both books start in an airport, like certain like motifs that sort of ended up in there. And I also think a lot of that book was also just me. Like I would follow any instinct. Like randomly there'd be this thing. And so writing this book, I sort of forced myself to be a little bit more disciplined about like stay on track, don't go on tangents, which was helpful. So yeah, ultimately, no regrets.
I think there was a question in the back. Great follow-up.
Mysterious books. I said mysterious books? Oh, you added it.
That was her editorializing.
Oh, got it. Well, it's funny because I've actually literally started in 2019 or 2018 writing down every book I read every year to just like remind me of what I read. So I wrote this in 2019. Let's see, what was I reading? It's gonna take me, okay. Let's see. So I read Second Class Citizen by Buchi Emecheta, which is like her loosely based autobiography so Buchi Emecheta is like this famous Nigerian author, and she went to England like in the 1960s. She had like 5 kids. She was like an aspiring writer. She was like writing on the side, and her husband was abusive and like burned her manuscript. So like I was reading that, and then I was reading. So there's this book called So Long a Letter by Mariam Abba. I was trying to very intentionally read books by African women, and so this is just a book about 2 Muslim women. They're living in Senegal, and one of them is like divorcing her husband, and they write each other letters. I was also just trying to, because the character of Zainab is Muslim and she's Hausa, and like I'm not either of those things. So I was trying to find books that sort of would lend me some sort of understanding culturally of what was going on. What are some other books here? I mean, I was reading randomly Garth Greenwell. So like Cleanness and What Belongs to You are 2 of his novels, and he writes very raunchy scenes, which I love. And so like a lot of the scenes in the novel that are more raunchy, I like maybe vaguely drew inspiration from, in a weird way, from him. Yeah, and then there are a few books that I won't name that I didn't like, and I was like, I can write better than them, and so that was inspiring.
It's always good to know what you don't like. Yeah.
When you said just now that you wrote this in 2019, that kind of surprised me because I had this image in my head of you like sitting in the pandemic and you were like, well, no one else is going out, so I can write. That's like what would happen for me, I think. So I'm curious, like, how did the pandemic shift your writing practice? And do you think that if you had started in 2020, like, would things be different?
Yeah, I don't think I would have finished it if I had started in 2020. But I do think by like January 2020, I had most of it done. And it was actually, I was one of those, I feel embarrassed to say, but I was one of those people, I like went to stay with my parents in Omaha. But it was good because I was like, I cannot engage in the news when I'm not working in news. So on weekends, I wrote and I read, and like those 2 or 3 months were basically allowed me to like finish the draft, edit it, and then that process felt really seamless. And I honestly think there was something about just not having any, no one to hang out with, no distractions, that just really allowed me to focus. And I think it just would have been to have, I think at some point it just became like really draining. But the fact that I had like the bones of the draft already really helped. But yeah, I would honestly say, and I don't know to what extent I would have finished. I feel like I would have been like treading water if it hadn't been for like the shock of like, okay, there's nothing to do now.
I know I work here, but I do have a question. I love asking debut novelists this, but what are you doing to celebrate your debut? Can we also look forward to anything new from you, or do you have something new that's kind of stirring in the back of your head? And then also for Alex, can we look forward to anything from you?
Oh, I'm not in this.
Wow, so cryptic. You're like, I'm having work trip to LA, and I'm like, who are you profiling? But you want to tell me. It's hard. I feel like I have to like remind myself to be joyful. I feel like it's not natural. I think I tend to be a muted person, and like it's been funny because working at BuzzFeed, people are not like that at all. And so people are always like, oh, "You must be so excited," and I'm just always like, "Yeah," And so it feels really awkward. But like, I feel like I'm definitely probably going to drink tonight, and that would be fun. And in terms of support, telling friends is really wonderful, and like. I think that's probably the big thing, is just like the word of mouth. Like if you're the kind of person who posts things, like post things. But honestly, like having so many people here today has been really, really lovely.
Well, I think that's our time, but thank you all for coming, and congratulations, Tomi.
Make you want to read the book, I don't know what will. Thank you so much everyone for coming out tonight, being such a great audience. Thank you Tomi and to Alex for the wonderful conversation. As a reminder, Tomi will be signing at our back desk, so please wait to approach the desk until she's gotten settled back there. You can purchase additional copies of Dele, Weds, Destiny, which we highly recommend, at the signing desk. And for those of us who are still with us on YouTube, you can find a link to purchase books in the description. That's all for me. So thanks again everyone for joining us. Now please join me in giving Tomi and Alex one last round of applause. Oh, purchase books at the front. So sorry.